Yo gamers, what's up? It's Goldemon here, back with another Honkai Star video, and this is definitely not the second time I'm trying to record this. No, never, never. Uh, and yeah, if anyone's wondering about the lack of uploads, just college stuff, right? And IRL things, don't worry about it. But today, I wanted to talk about Aventurine, as Hoyoverse has graciously announced that we can sort of talk about it. Did I close the wrong? I did. Whatever, I'll pull it up. Hoyoverse has so graciously allowed us to talk about stuff in the creator experience server without risk of DMCA strike and all that stuff. So that's cool. I'll be talking about him. We'll be talking about this. If you want to know what materials to pre-farm in case you didn't watch the other video, here you go. It's on screen. You have the new preservation mats, right? The bug weekly boss, the memory zone meme enemies, and the imaginary level up material for the bosses. Have fun with that. Um, I'll talk about the traces and everything in a minute, and then obviously the relics. We'll talk about this as well because this is not 100% what I would say. Just of course recommended for most players, 4-piece knight, and I'll explain that later as well. If you want to know the teams, there you go. Here's a couple of teams. The best one here is obviously the IPC team, right? I wouldn't really do the other ones. And if you're a whale, well, of course you can do Acheron at E2S1. As for the light cones, there's this. There's the one other light cone, the March 7th. I think it's the Battle Pass light cone, if I'm not mistaken. In replace of this one, but generally it's about this, right? And there's the free to play one that I don't think I actually mentioned either. It's the one with Firefly on it. That one's pretty solid as well. It allows you to build effect res and get some damage out of it. So pretty solid. And I'll explain all that as we hop into it. But yeah, I just want to say, as a general like TLDR, I think he's very strong. If you need a defensive character, he's probably worth getting, right? He competes with Fu Xuan, and there will be some people that like to argue against that, but truly he does compete with Fu Xuan, so he will be very good across the game for a lot of players. And of course, little bonuses is that shields are incredibly strong in simulated, universe. So there's that as well. So yeah, let's hop into it, right? Let's get the yapping away. No longer yapping about Akron, we're yapping about Aventurine, right? So let's get going. So starting off, we have one of his major traces, leverage. For every 100% defense he has that exceeds a certain limit, which is 1600, it will increase his crit rate up to 48%, right? And of course, we can go to Startle Station and take a look at that, right? Traces right here. This trace, right? So this trace will max out a 4K defense. The goal of him, right, or the goal that you're trying to hit when building him, especially if you're building him for damage, is to get 4K defense, because that's where this trace maxes out, giving you the most amount of crit rate you can get from building him defense, right? And as you can tell clear from this trace, he's meant to be more of a hybrid character. Now his shields are very impressive. You can get really strong shields, and again, that's the main goal of a preservation character, right? To protect the team. And so he will be doing that while building damage at the same time, right? So that's pretty solid. And this will matter for what you gear him towards as well, considering you, jumping ahead of myself, considering you build defense on him anyways, and you're already getting at like 50 crit, right? That's pretty easy to build, and that makes him pretty good, as an overall character, right? The only other character that gets this much CV like in their base kit is like Jing Liu. So yeah, that's pretty nice. His second trace, Hot Hand. When the battle starts, it grants all allies his skill shield, uh, based on a certain percentage of that skill shield, right? And it lasts for a number of turns, right? I believe this lasts for 3 turns, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, 3 turns. So basically, what this is it's kind of like a built-in Japard technique, right? You know how Japard uses technique? You start the battle with a certain amount of your shield. This is what will happen if you use, or not use, but just literally just have the character on the team. You start the battle with the shield. Very good. This is very good for preventing chip damage from any really fast enemies, and this is good for him starting out the battle, as he'll be able to stack his shield even more, right? You'll be able to hit that cap right immediately off like the first skill use, or you just can use a basic, right, and have him be completely skill point positive throughout the fight, because as we'll get into, he doesn't actually have to ever use his skill if you don't want to, right? As long as you get enough follow-ups and all that stuff going on. So yeah, very good trace. Good across the board again. Starting out the battle with shield up, huge. Great for defensive, preventing chip damage, as well as your skill point positivity for this character. So that's pretty nice. And this other trace, a bingo. This one's, a bit long. So after an ally with the shield launches a follow-up attack, right? So that'll be like Topaz, Dr. Ratio, Jingwon, any follow-up characters. He will obtain one blind bet. And what blind bet is for is that is his stack count that you see on the character, right? It goes from 1 to 7, or it can go up to 10 out of 7, right? But he'll gain a point, and whenever he gets up to 7, right, lucky number 7, he'll do a follow-up attack, right? So that's what this is for. This effect can trigger a certain number of times. Again, that's just saying you get one stack per follow-up, right? This trigger count resets at the start of his turn after Aventurine launches a follow-up attack, provides all allies with a fortified wager shield. So this is good because whenever he does follow-up, it will refresh his shield, which will also refresh the cooldown, the duration of the shield, right? So whenever he does follow-up, he'll give a little bump to the shield, right? A small shield bump, and refresh the cooldown. So like I said, you never have to skill with him if you don't need to, right? Of course, there's some scenarios where you want the extra boost and shield, but if he does have enough defense percent, and if your characters are built well enough, you realistically never have to use the skill, right? So that's a very powerful effect. And in case you want to see the percentages, it's here. It's 7% of his defense plus 96 for that first hit. And then the second part of it is additionally grants a fortified wager shield that can block damage equal to 7.2%. And it's the same percentage. I actually didn't know that. Did they change that? Okay, they might have changed that from when I last looked at this. But anyways, you'll get additional shield percent to the ally with the lowest amount of shield, right? So that's really good because that means if you have one person who took, more damage, right, they'll just get double the amount they would have gotten normally from this trace, right? So that's pretty good in terms of his sustainability. And well, of course, you want to have your shield up at all times so you don't die, right? It's pretty simple there, right? So yeah. Pretty good traces, all things considered, right? This is very good that we see with, more modern characters is that they all have traces that matter, right? You can look at some of the old characters that don't really have too important traces, like, I don't know, Herta buffing her basic attack or something. I think it's actually her skill damage, but you get what I'm saying, right? Good, rounded traces for a defensive character, and this bingo trace will tie into his other aspects of the kit, right? Just like, again, as I said, the follow-up, right? The whole point of this is that you run him in a follow-up team, he'll get more stacks, meaning more shield uptime, right? Or more shield stacking. So you can have your maximum shield at all times, right? So keep that in mind when using him. He does excel clearly in the follow-up attack team. That's where he's designed to be, right? Like I have here, right, with the team suggestion, right? This IPC team where everybody's doing follow-ups, he's going to get a lot of stacks, built up. And this does require more investment, right? You ideally want it's E1 S1 Topaz so that she gets 3 debuffs, and so Ratio will be able to get 4 with just those 2, and then 5 for May, and 6, potentially even 7 or 8 when you have him at E2 S1, right? So keep that in mind, right? He'll excel here, assuming you do invest into the team a decent amount, right? Otherwise, kind of like Fushuan, you can slap him wherever, he'll do good, and you'll see that as I continue reading on. So his technique, I'm just gonna, again, this isn't anything crazy. He's got a pretty, I wouldn't say bad technique, but it's not practical, right? So his technique is RNG. He gets 3 different buffs. It's either a 20% defense buff for 3 turns, 40% defense buff for 3 turns, or 60% defense buff for 3 turns, with the 60 being the rarest. It's completely RNG, so you're just gonna have to keep sitting there spinning technique points to get the max buff, right? Obviously starting at the battle of higher defense is good for his shield and his damage, but again, it being RNG will, suffer it will be bad for some people, right? Because you may be like, oh, I'm about to do this, run an MOC. Oh, I didn't get max shield, time to reset 20 times, right? So yeah, it's an interesting technique, nothing crazy, I'd say. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that one, to be honest. I it's cool that they, have a, little Gamba thing going on for a Gamba character, but gameplay wise, it's kind of not cool because most other characters nowadays have way better techniques, right? The techniques have just been getting, better and better, right? So this is kind of unfortunate to see that this character has a technique that isn't already too impactful. It would have been nice if it was like a flat 10% defense for the whole battle, and then you did the random effects on top, so like additional 10% or additional 30%, right? But it is what it is, right? Basic attack. So the one thing to know about his basic attack is that it actually scales on his defense, just like his shield, right? So this will be good for his damage, and this is important for his higher Eidolons, is that this scales off of his defense percent, just like the shield does, right? So you'll be able to get decent damage out of the basic, assuming you are, investing a lot into this character. And yeah, that's just, something worth noting, right? That it will matter leveling the basic, for those higher investment tiers because it scales off of a stat you're already building into, right? All right, his talent ability. Time for more yapping, right? Everyone's favorite. So okay, this is one of those Hoyo wording problems. I've mentioned it before. Terrible English localization for some of these abilities, but bear with me. For any single ally with fortified wager, their effect res increases, and when they get attacked, Aventurine gains blind bet. So basically, right, you get 50% effect res whenever somebody is attacked, right? And I actually don't know if it shows up in the stat screen. Somebody in the comments will probably correct me on that one, but basically your whole team will be getting a 50% effect res at all times. And effect res, very, very powerful. If you get 100 effect res, you're completely immune to debuffs. So enemy bleed, CC, right, other dot procs, like HP down effects, whatever effect that is being applied that isn't like some fixed chance sort of thing, you'll be completely immune to debuffs, right? Which is very, very powerful to have as well. 100% uptime on 100% effect res, you won't be getting CC'd. You'll have like perfect, runs, right? You won't have to worry about dying to a specific status effect or a character losing a DPS rotation like Jingu 1 of Lightning Lord because you get CC'd. So that's a very powerful effect, and it will be great for all the supports that build with like broken I believe it's Keel is how you pronounce it. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. But those characters that already build effect res will allow them to hit 100 very easily and then be completely immune to debuff. So this is great. And of course, characters like Jingle Liu, who give herself like a huge chunk of effect res with that cracked kit, you'll be able to hit 100 and be completely immune to debuffs, right? So pretty nice, just flat 50% buff here for literally having a shield active. That's really good. And the thing to keep in mind is 50% on itself isn't actually 50%. It's based on the ratio of this and the enemy's effect hit rate. But the important thing to know here and why it's powerful is getting up to 100 can make you immune to debuffs, right? So very, very powerful effect there. And then of course, whenever the ally is hit, they gain one stack here. And the reason why this is important is because this will stack with his other trace, right? So whenever he gets hit, he'll get 2 stacks, right? So that's pretty cool to have. Yeah, so whenever Aventurine has his shield up, he can resist crowd control debuffs. So this is interesting. So when he has his own shield, he's already resistant to CC. And this is every 2 turns. But the funny thing about this is he has built-in effect res, right? If you look at the traces, we have effect res here. So what you can do is you can build like I think it's a less than 20 from substats like effect res on him, and then just ignore this part of the trace and have him be completely immune to debuffs. He's giving himself 50 already. He has some of it built in. You run the broken Kel set or Keel. Yeah, whatever this. You run that set, and then he's completely immune to debuffs. So you don't even need to worry about the CC trace. He's just already at 100% effect res. So very powerful right here. Even if you don't build into it, it's good for his general like use. But building into it like you should, he'll be already immune to debuffs, which is crazy to think about that both Gallagher and him have very high effect res built into their kits, so they're just immune to debuffs, right? So that's huge for defensive utility on these characters because it makes them safe and it makes your team safer, right? So that's pretty solid right there. And then of course, Aventurine additionally gains 1 point of blind bet after getting attacked. And so this is how it stacks, right? You get him getting attacked, and then you get the other one of ally getting attacked on top of each other. So you get your 2. Right. Upon reaching 7 points of blind bet, Aventurine consumes 7 points and does a follow-up attack. It maxes at 10, so that whenever you use like the ultimate and you overflow a little bit, it will just, go like 7 out of 10, use the 7, 3 out of 7, right? And then with each enemy hit, you deal imaginary damage based on 25% of its defense. Not a lot, but hey, 7 hits, 25%. Decent multiplier, right? Nope. I mean, I'm not even going to pull that up. We're not going to bother. We're going to keep going. Keep yapping. And yeah, as I said, blind bet's capped at 10 points. So Excuse me. Don't even know why I'm burping, but moving on, right? Very impactful talent. So his skill provides the shield for a certain amount of turns. As yeah, simple as that. He's a character, a defense character, who has an all allies shield on his skill. And it's a pretty powerful shield, right? 24% of his defense plus 320 for 3 turns, right? And then it can stack up to 200%, right? That's its max cap right there. So yeah, this is pretty nice to have. And in case you guys want to know what that is, um, I'll just do like the regular amount, right? Uh, don't want to do this wrong. Do it quick on the fly. Times 2. Boom. There you go. That's how much shield you can get from him at like 4K defense, which is a very good shield, right? And especially considering that this will essentially have 100% uptime with all of his other effects, right? Him refreshing his shield and him getting extra stacks from characters following up, right? So you can get a very powerful shield and just never have to use a skill, which is pretty nice, right? Of course, if you do use the skill, you get energy back and hit his ultimate more often, but point is that it's a very good shield, and unlike Japard, who has to use his ultimate to refresh the shield, you can use the shield from your skill, right? And it'll have way better uptime in that regard, and won't have to like need hits for certain rotation, or you won't have to worry about losing the shield on certain characters. I mean, obviously certain characters with turn advancement like Jingle you could drop the shield every once in a while, but him being able to just refresh the shield so often is very good for those specific reasons, right? If you get into a case like that, right? So very nice right there. All right, his ultimate, I've kind of already covered this, but basically his ultimate just, it does damage. I mean, what more can you say? It does damage. It gives him a certain number of blind bet, 1 to 7, right? It's random, right? So it'll be a bit RNG for his follow-up damage there. But after the fact, right, it will increase the crit damage dealt to the enemy by 15%, right? So that's 15% extra crit damage that you do to whatever enemy you target. Now, this is single target, unfortunately. I do wish it was AoE, but it is what it is. It's, pretty nice effect giving him a debuff, right, in his ultimate, which means he will work decently well with Acheron and like trend on him, right? You could stack those to get multiple debuffs. Or if you are whaling, right, you can go for his Eidolons and get E2S1 to have a basic attack. Sorry, you can have res down on your basic and then have your follow-up also apply a damage vulnerability on them, right? So pretty solid. Again, nothing too crazy from the ultimate. It's just giving him extra damage, right, while dealing damage and then boosting the crit damage dealt. And this is like the main part of the character, or the character's ultimate, I would say, is the fact that he boosts his crit damage from the ult. So that will be massive for all your characters on the team because, well, in the follow-up team, basically everybody but Ruan Mei is doing damage, right? So this is pretty nice for that. And again, unfortunate, it's single target. That's just sort of how it is. So yeah, hopefully that helps anybody understand this character, right? Oh my God, it's been 18 minutes. Dear God. Um, the Yap Fest continues, right? From Acheron app yapping to Aventurine yapping. So yeah, hopefully that explains the character, right? I'm just gonna fly through this quickly, or try to. His light cone, inherently unjust destiny. In case you guys don't know, this is a very powerful light cone for him specifically, just like most of these light cones, right? So it increases his defense by 40%, and whenever he provides a shield, or whenever the wearer provides a shield, it's 40% crit damage, right? And well, as you know, as we went over, his shield is constantly refreshing, so he'll have a constant 40% crit damage. Huge buff, right? Whenever the wearer follow-up attack hits, there's a 100% base chance. Now, unfortunately, it's base chance, so technically you do need effect hit rate for this to work properly, but it will increase the damage taken by the target by 10%, lasting for 2 turns, right? And so this is a damage vulnerability, I believe. So this is a pretty powerful effect, actually. 10% extra damage is pretty significant in terms of the actual, damage taken multiplier, right? If we want to compare this. My bad, let me do this right here. So you see, like, this is the normal damage you would be doing from, like, level 80 to an enemy in MOC, right? And if we do, like, a 10%, damage taken multiplier, it goes up to 46. So it's, like, a net 5% damage increase for, most things. And, again, that is stacked multiplicatively with other effects. So it's a pretty strong light count in terms of overall team damage and his own damage. I believe I Went to Lose calculated it at, like, just with a quick in-game test at like 45% damage increase over free-to-play options. And so, yeah, look, the one thing I will say that I haven't really covered yet, and I probably should have mentioned this at the start, I would not expect, or, well, there's two things. If you are just getting E0, not going for weapon, don't expect him to do a crazy amount of damage. His primary focus is a defense character. He's not primary focus as a damage dealer at E0. If you look at his Eidolons, right, and this is one important thing to talk about, his Eidolons are all damage focused, right? And so you could pretty much say that his damage is whale bait, and it kind of is, right? Your goal for this character is to protect the team first and foremost. Then you deal damage, right? That is what he's supposed to do, right? And so a lot of people are hung up on like, and this is something I mentioned in the original recording, but like the whole relic thing in terms of him doing damage. It's like, don't worry about him doing damage. Worry about him protecting your team and keeping them alive first. Then worry about damage, right? So the reason why this matters for the light cone is because there's a significant gap from this in free-to-play options, right? So you're going to want to consider this heavily if you do care about him doing damage. But I'll be honest, you don't need this, and you don't need him to do any significant damage, right? Him doing a difference of like 15k follow-up to a 25k follow-up is like, damn, that's a significant difference. But if your DPS is well built, that your DPS should be doing 10 times that amount damage and killing the enemy, right? Again, Jingle Yu is doing like 100k plus follow-ups, right? Or not follow-ups, sorry, enhanced skills, right? So his damage contributing to it is way less important than your main DPS dealing damage, for example, right? So that is just something to keep in mind. I know a lot of people, oh, I didn't get rid of it, whatever. I know a lot of people are hung up on the whole damage thing with him. In my opinion, he's very good. As I said, I think he competes with Fu Xuan. I don't think the damage is the primary concern with this character. Damage is secondary to his defensive ability. Uh, a lot of people can understand this and agree with this, right? You'll see this talked about probably from other creators, but I just want to mention that there is that please stop coping about his damage. He's a preservation character. Just he's boosting your damage via other means. Okay. Right. Yes, his damage matters to some extent, but it doesn't matter as much as your main DPS dealing damage, right? Make sense? Is that fair? So yeah. His Eidolons, E1, it buffs your crit damage by 20% for all allies with the shield. Awesome. And then you have like Zhongli ultimate effect here. So whenever you use his ult, you get a shield refresh, right? Pog. E2, this is the big one. It gives your basic attack 12% res down for 3 turns, which means, again, he's already spamming basic because he's incredibly skill point positive and has a pretty high base speed. I didn't mention that, but 106 is very high for a preservation character. This means he will apply debuff on every basic, which is great for Acheron teams, but also it's res down. So like if we were to come back to the multiplier thing, it's going to stack multiplicatively with all of your other effects, right? And this is if it's an imaginary weak enemy, right? You're just going to do way more damage because of, you know, both of these effects of this character, right? Very, very impactful having this right here. And of course, the E4 is, you know, his follow-up gives him extra defense, right? Pretty cool. And it also increases the damage dealt, right? So that's nice. And then E6 is, again, more damage from him, where everyone with the shield increases his damage percent up to 150%, right? So yeah, as you can see, and like I've been saying, his damage is heavily, heavily into his Eidolons and other aspects of his kit. So again, just keep that in mind. Defense first, damage second. He's very good, don't get me wrong, but it's important to consider the fact that he is primarily there for the skill point positivity and providing the shield, right? And so, yeah. I guess this is my overall thoughts. I guess we can talk about light cones real quickly in terms of what you're gonna want to use on him. You can really use realistically anything, right? Any one of these are great if you are free to play and you are focusing on damage. Of course, this one will matter because you need to hit X number of defense percent, so you need to get a lot of defense here, and it's kind of hard to do because it has a low, you know, free to play stats for a light cone, right? But this does give you the effect res and damage percent for him, so you can use that, the new one. If you do summon on the banner, of course, you have this one, which is also going to be really good because it gives you way more damage percent and better defenses, right, for a light cone, right? Because it gets defense percent. So if you do touch the banner, this is going to be basically his best 4-star option realistically. That's pretty nice. This is me is another notable one, right? So it has higher stats than the other ones and higher defense. So if you're just going for raw defense, you could use this, right? That's gonna be pretty good. I wouldn't use We Are Wildfire, because it's just, you know, it's at the start of the battle, so like maybe it'll be good for the first few turns, but after that, it won't matter. Trinity Universal Market has a lower defense, and so you might suffer in terms of overall damage. But if you're planning to use him with Acheron and you don't have or Japard, then you'd probably want to use that. Lando's Choice, again, it's got low stats, so you might not want to use that. Day one of My New Life is the one I would recommend if you do have it, right? 463 defense with defense percent, and all allies res up, so that's pretty good. And of course, you've got the 5-star options like Japard's Light Cone, which is going to be his best like option outside of that, right? Because high stats, defense percent, you got all you need. And then of course his own Light Cone. As for relics, because I know people are gonna want to ask me about this and are like, what the hell? You telling me to put two-piece defense, two-piece defense, god damn it, damage reduction on the character and 4-piece defense? Yes, I am, because he's a shielder. All right, I had somebody in the comments like vehemently disagree with me about the relic recommendations, but first off, you shouldn't be focusing on the damage, especially if you're free to play, and that much is obvious because all the damage is packed in as like Eidolons and other high investment things. And so the goal here is to protect your team while still getting damage. As you can see, I do recommend either going for crit or defense based on what you're doing, shielding or damage. Of course, you probably want speed boots because you want them to keep up with the team and give you skill points back. Or of course, defense or imaginary percent with the defense rope because energy recharge he doesn't really care about. Stats, same thing, right? You get your effect res up, so you get a 100 effect res and make yourself immune to debuffs. Get your defense up for your damage. Go for crit. Go for speed. Just like every other character, right? I don't think it's very hard to understand why I'm recommending this because this is going to get you your damage with the defense percent and your shield up, right? Just that simple. All right, so to talk about the relics, what do we have as possible options? Well, obviously Night of Purity is going to be your arguably best set and most efficient because, well, it just gives you defense, so that's where all your damage scales off of, and it gives you shield percent. So there you go. You're done. You have a very powerful shield and you got more damage like you want. It's that simple. Now, of course, you can do other options like giving yourself speed if you really want, or giving yourself imaginary damage as the other 2-piece, and just run this 2-piece, right? So if you did want to build more than damage, you could do 2-piece imaginary damage, 2-piece defense set, right? But either way, this is going to be his best and most practical set for most players, right? Guard, I do recommend the 2-piece because if you don't have this, or if you're farming the quantum set, you're going to get this anyways. And so you could just do a 2-piece defense, 2-piece guard, right? Him having damage reduction doesn't matter that much, but damage reduction is still better than nothing, right? That's why I recommend this. If you have it, it's okay to use. I'm not saying that you should go out and farm this because you definitely shouldn't. The other set's better. But if you have this, it's something that you can use them as a 2-piece that will be pretty solid because they'll keep them alive, right? Just that simple, right? Also, this is more in context of like Sim Uni, right? Because you want to get damage reduction, right? So stay alive. So just, makes sense to me. Just saying. That being said, none of these other sets really do too much for him. Wastelander, again, is what you would do a 2-piece. You wouldn't really run the 4-piece, although you can because he does apply debuff, right? So, and plus the teams you'll run him in, like the follow-up team, will have a bunch of debuffs. So realistically, you could run this and be pretty good, right? You get your crit, get your damage, you could run that as well. You could also 2-piece speed, of course. I wouldn't recommend this over the other options though, because they either net you more damage or, more defense. It's really like that. A lot of people are going to want to run the Ash Blazing Grand Duke. You could run this, but I'll be honest, I don't really see a point because like it gives him attack percent, which does nothing for him. So the 4-piece is kind of useless in that regard because attack percent he doesn't scale off of. The 2-piece though, you could do 2-piece this, 2-piece defense set, and that'd be pretty good. So yeah, 2-piece Ash Blazing Grand Duke, pretty solid for him. And then his best set in terms of actual damage, if you're maximizing damage, it's going to be the Pioneer Dead Waters because again, he'll have a debuff. His teams are going to be running debuffs, and he'll be doing more damage against debuff targets. So if you are trying to maximize damage, you're still farming the Acheron set. Again, this is a very universal set for a lot of these characters, right? So there's that. As for the planars, right, it's sort of same thought process. If you want to buff the team by giving them attack, you run fleet, right? Again, I wouldn't do it. If you want the extra defense, you run Bellabog. Just that simple, right? If you want the extra damage via his follow-up and ultimate, you run an inert Salcedo, right? It's just that simple. What I would recommend is Broken Nell, or God damn it, whatever. Somebody will correct me in the comments. You run this, right? He's giving himself effect res already at all times. He has it built into his kit, and he's giving everyone crit damage. So this is buffing his own crit damage and the whole team's crit damage. So personally, this is the best one, right? By far. I mean, obviously this one's going to be better for his net damage, but I'll be honest, I think Broken Nell is going to be better. It's just that simple, right? The rest of them don't really do too much for him. So there's that. Oh, well, actually, there's the new one, right? The oh, how do you say this? I'm not going to pronounce it. You know what I'm talking about. The one that buffs crit, right? Theoretically, this is going to be his best option if you ever use him. I mean, you probably wouldn't use him in pure fiction because he's a preservation character. But in like MOC, right, you could use this set and it would be his best. It would technically be his best for like net damage, right? So there's that. Yeah, I think that's everything I can really cover, guys, in terms of like pre-release analysis. Again, I think he's strong. If you want like a breakdown in terms of what he actually does and why I say he compares to Fu, well, here you go, right? You get your tanking ability, right? FSP positive, right? They give you crit damage or crit buffs in some sort of way, right? He buffs your res. She has a one-time resist, so it's kind of better. He resists CC just straight up, so you know there is that to keep in mind, right? This matters for him because his is based on turns, right? Hers isn't. It's based on her, or it's based on her own turn. And I say that because in terms of like shield refreshing, right? Nerd stuff. You go to Eidolons, right? They both have crit damage buffs, and then he gets a refresh. He has resistance down. She gets a revive. He has defense up, which again, more damage, and then she has energy recharge, and then they have damage as a final Eidolon. And then the light cones is team damage percent versus damage taken, right? So they basically do the same thing, except theoretically, Avin, in a scenario where you have higher investment, you'll probably get more out of actually than Fushuan. But some people aren't ready to hear the facts, right? That's basically it. I don't have much more to say. I think it's very strong. If you have any questions about regarding him, feel free to ask. If I'm sure as like a final thing I'll say, because people are gonna ask, is he worth it? If you don't have a good sustain that's a 5-star, yes, he's worth it. If you are like me and you already have good sustains like Gallagher built, Japard built, or whoever, and actually let me pull that up. I don't know why I'm saying I should just pull it up. It's literally right here on the screen. I'm an idiot. But yeah, if you already have other sustains invested into that are well built, right? Like again, literally any of them, you probably don't need them, right? Will he be better than someone like Japard? Yeah, he will. But realistically, and like let's say you have Akron, for example, he's not doing significantly more than Japard is for her, right? So I just want to put that out there. He's very good, right? Comparable to Fushuan. Just again, if you have other sustains built and your account's well invested into, you don't need them. Just that simple, right? That's just how it is. So yeah, thank you all for watching. I know I yapped a lot. Pre-release analysis got pretty long. I feel like with the character kits and everything, it's gonna get longer and longer, but we'll see how it is. Again, I've already said at the beginning, TLDR, he's good. And yeah, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe for more, and see you next time.